Welcome to the HealthspanMD podcast. One of the most powerful things that has ever been told to me by a patient was this: I don't want to die in front of my children like my dad did. Today, I have the man who said that to me here. And what we're going to talk about is where he was and where he is now. And I want to frame this around medicine 3.0. We're going to define what that is, why I think, great care, being proactive, relationships, and results are the way of the future for healthcare. Welcome to the HealthspanMD podcast, Mathew.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I was so stunned by your statement when we first met. We had met at an event.
A couple of years ago.
You were doing a professional presentation at that. I'm like, God, I love this guy's message. We talked a little while. There just seemed to be a synergy, and I don't know, just along the way, we ended up working. I was a guest on your podcast, and
several times.
But when we were establishing our working relationship, you shared that with me, and then we ended up having a doctor-patient relationship as well. Tell us the story.
Yeah, well, so how far do you want me to go back?
You
drive
decide.
it. Yeah. Well, listen, I had a pretty significant life event happen to me when I was 23 years old, 1996. My dad had what I learned from you was called sudden cardiac death. So the first day we learned he had a problem was the day that he died. And to make that situation a little bit more aggressive, I was the one that was there, and I was the one that tried to save his life. I performed CPR on my dad. I was pumping on my dad's chest. I'm the one that lifted him out of his chair and laid him down to get to work on him. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
And it didn't work, and he died. And I swore to myself in that moment, when I have kids, that never gets to be their fate. Because it was single-handedly one of the hardest things I've ever had to battle back from.
It's devastating. Like, what a shocking thing that you had to deal with, and to think that happens 1,000 times a day in the U.S. is mind-boggling. And
yeah, but you know what's better? What's mind-boggling is that 80% of the time it's preventable.
Yeah.
And this is what I've learned from you, right? And that's what got my attention.
Well, and I'll share this with you. I've just been thinking about this over the last week. I think it's a lot higher than 80%. I think it's 99% or higher. My practice has been preventing heart disease. I was going to be a general cardiologist or a cardiologist, interventional cardiologist. I wanted to fix sick people. That's what I was trying to do. I read the literature. 80% of heart disease is preventable. There was subsequent research. 93% of heart attacks are preventable. And I started the Heart Health and Performance Program at Mayo Clinic to do that, to deliver that type of care. And what I've realized, I look back, and heart attacks, like what unfortunately your dad suffered from, what these 2,200 times a day people have, most of them are what we call type 1 heart attacks or myocardial infarctions. They're plaque rupture. It's a plaque, it ruptures, it forms a blood clot, and heart attack ensues. Those are the ones that are preventable. I think the last patient that I have that had a type 1 heart attack was in 2007.
Yeah,
and I'm taking care of people that are very high risk, right? Who comes to a preventive cardiologist? People that are worried about having a heart attack. And so I think it's even higher than that. I don't have the research to show you, but I do have research that shows this 93% preventable. That's even more heartbreaking in relation to your experience with your father, but I would guess also it provides some optimism that the second part of that, you said, I don't want to die in front of my children.
That's the big thing, right? Because I know that mark. I know how many years that moment scarred me and put me into a tailspin. And, I really hope that other parents listen to this right now, especially those that have kids. And I don't care if it's genetic. I don't care if everybody before you has died in your family. It just doesn't have to be your fate. And, I think with my dad, he was a military guy. I'm sure he was a proud dude who, didn't want to make a fuss about how he was feeling. And that's how it ended. That's how it wrapped up for him. And then on top of that, right, like my mom really got sick the last few years of her life and ended up on the table needing unbelievable heart surgery and a pacemaker and all this other stuff. And she was just never the same after the heart surgery.
Yeah.
In fact, it really kind of put her into a really slow 3-year tailspin where she ended up losing her life just last year. No. And so much of that, I mean, that's what really gets me going, is that so much of it is preventable.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is do the right things. And I'll tell you, and I think I've shared this with you on another podcast that we were on, before I met you, I didn't really see the point. I thought it would just, I was like, listen, I'll do what I can. I'll try to be healthy. I'll try to eat right. But, that's probably going to be my fate too. I don't believe that anymore. I mean, you said something to me, you talk about powerful words. You looked at me and you said, I think we're taking this off the table for you. And in a moment, everything shifted for me. I started eating even better. I started working out daily. I started paying attention to what I was doing. I started taking care of myself. I started sleeping right. I completely have changed the way that I take care of my body now because I have hope. Like, that's not on the table for me. But I know I need to put forth some effort in order to make sure that's true.
So many things to talk about there. One of the things is how powerful a clear path, a destination can be for people, hope, as you called it. In medicine, doctors often will talk about, well, people don't change, and it's because our experience has been they don't. They come in with health problems. We say, if you eat better, lose weight, quit smoking, quit drinking, all this, you'd feel better. Or if we're really feeling it, we'll say, well, if you don't do that, you're going to die. And then they don't change, and we're frustrated. But what I've learned, and this was actually a statement from Dean Ornish, I believe, is the one who said it, is that people don't resist change, they resist being changed. And when I started working collaboratively with my patients, rather than telling them what to do, giving them that clear path, hey, here's what's possible, and here's how we're going to do it. I found out, wait, people do change.
I'll tell you, one of the more frustrating conversations that I ever had with my mom, we were having a health conversation, and it was after I'd met you, and I was kind of pouring into her some of the things that I had learned, and she looked at me with this look in her eye, and she said, we got to die from something, Mathew. And I thought, yeah, but does it have to be that? Yeah. Did it have to be the way that it happened for us? And I think the answer is no. Like, what dad on earth wants his 2 sons and his wife to watch him die violently?
Yeah.
I think the answer is nobody.
I am pretty sure that is right.
Yeah.
I do want to get into the medicine 3.0 approach that we implemented with you, that I confidently told you this isn't going to be your thing. Like, I feel really good about that. But I want to talk a little bit about trauma. You faced an incredibly traumatic experience, and that's a really common issue. Like, people are dealing with trauma, and we haven't had great approach to that in healthcare, in medicine. What was somebody who was maybe dealing with a traumatic thing from their past, what advice would you have?
I would say that the first thing you have to do is face it head on. You have to just accept that it's what happened, and then you also have to have this belief or this hope that it won't happen to you, or that there's something you could do about it. Let me get into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
So here's what most people don't think about as it relates to trauma, is the way that it's going to impact them in their everyday life. Okay, so when my dad died and I was trying to save his life, 2 beliefs got set up within me. The first belief was that I didn't know enough, and the second belief was that I wasn't useful. That's unfair. It's completely unfair, and I get that, right? That's not what was trying to be done in that moment, but those 2 beliefs got set up in me. So let me take it a step further. that would show up in my personal life, where I would be in these situations and I would have something that I felt like I wanted to say, but that little voice would be in the back of my head going, you don't know enough. You're not useful. Shut up.
Yeah.
Just take a step back, man. And that definitely followed me into relationships. It 100% followed me into my career. And I think most people kind of know what I'm talking about now, right? Like, how many times are you in a situation and you have this reaction and you're like, where the hell did that come from? In my case, it came from those two moments. And so a few years ago, I had to face off with it. And I had to face off with those beliefs. And I think the best advice that I can give anybody is to go right frickin' through it. Like, just take it head on and go right through it.
Isn't that almost always the way? You know, there's a book, The Obstacle is the Way, Ryan Holiday, and it often is. Here's what's crazy to me is that you have had and you are creating another wildly successful career. Like you were at a pinnacle of a very competitive field, and from an outside perspective, you have everything. You're smart, you're articulate, you're charming, you're slender, you're athletic, you have amazing family, you have everything, and yet you had this belief that you were dealing with.
So I'll keep going on that. And so over the years, that belief got me into trouble. It did. Physically and emotionally and spiritually, mentally, all the things. It got me into a lot of trouble. And a few years ago, at the height of it, I was dealing with the situation at work. And what was so crazy to me was I knew enough, and I was the one that should have been there to do it. And I, for whatever reason, you ever have those dreams where you're screaming and nobody can hear you? It was like that was the moment. And it just unraveled me. And it started showing up in shingles first. And then it started to show up in these panic attacks that I would get, these nocturnal panic attacks where I'd wake up at 2:30 in the morning with my heart just pounding out of my chest. And it was on that third panic attack where I went to the emergency room because I thought I was having a heart attack. And the doctors came in after every test on planet Earth, and they said, you are physically fine. And that had been a theme for me. And I really want people to pay attention to this. If this is a theme for you, you might want to pay attention to it. Do you go to the doctor and your back hurts, but they can't find any reason? Do you go and you've got this stomach issue, but nobody can figure out what it is? Does it come? Does it go? Right? Like a bad back's a bad back. It's just going to hurt all the time. But mine would flare up and I would have some back pain one days and then other days it would be totally fine. So in that moment where they came to me and they said, you're physically fine, I knew it was time to start dealing with the trauma. And you know, there's a few things in my past, like there are for almost everybody, but the biggest one was the situation that I dealt with my father. Like, just nobody prepares you for that moment.
Wow. Yeah, you know, that scenario you just painted with you know, symptoms that just you can't find a reason for it, a physical reason for it, wildly common. Like maybe it's part of my background. I was at Mayo Clinic. Where do those people end up? Places like Mayo Clinic, a lot. But it was heartbreaking to watch people go doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to get more testing, repeat testing, doing all these things, spending so much money. They're desperately looking for a physical cause because that will validate it then, you know? And
see, this is the reason.
And
right.
It's not there. And medicine's doesn't do a good job of saying, hey, let's look at other explanations here. You know, and I use this line a lot with people. I'll say medicine's really good at finding things that'll kill you and things that they can fix, but that doesn't explain all symptoms. And I think that this is a burgeoning field in medicine. You know, there are some specialists that are out there saying, my specialty is when you have these symptoms and all the tests are normal. And you know, and they're doing this holistic approach to health. There's a big need for that.
Well, you have to get to the root cause of what the problem is.
Yeah.
And to me, you know, listen, I think that a lot of our anxiety and our stress comes from inaction. I've kind of bought into that philosophy.
Isn't that true?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what is inaction? Like, that's you not doing something about it. And so let me take you back to what I just talked about. If you don't think you're good enough, if you don't think you're smart enough, and if you don't think you're useful enough, why the hell would you take care of yourself?
Yeah.
Explain that. You wouldn't. You'd just throw in the towel and you'd say, this is the way it is, and you'd keep that story going in your head, and every day you would find reasons to validate it. The world will prove you right every single day of your life. You're a brilliant person. It'll just keep showing you. But if you take the bull by the horns and you say, wait, hold on a second, let me activate. Let me take control of my life. Let me take control of my mental health. Let me take control of my physical health. Let me take control of my spiritual health. What I can tell you unequivocally is the moment that I walked away from the stressful career, combined with the fact that I went to work on all of that emotional trauma that I had suffered over the years, I have never had a back flare-up since.
Wow.
This is 3.5 years. I don't even think about my back anymore. It doesn't bother me.
Wow. What percentage of people, I mean, I know this is just your opinion and, based on your experiences, but what percentage of people do you think are struggling with issues is similar to that?
Man, where I grew up, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was saying,
everybody.
just listening to your story, and there's so many examples of the same thing. One, I'm addicted to comfort. Like, I love comfort. Like, doing something uncomfortable, very uncomfortable for me, right? But every time I do it, there's magic. Like, that's what it takes. But when you have those beliefs, and they're put in us when we're young, like, it's not something that we earned in a lot of cases. Right. It was something that was given to us.
It should be said, you don't have much control over it, right? Like, so in the end of the day, like, you didn't do that to yourself. And what's the phrase? It's like, it's not your fault that it happened to you, but it's your responsibility to deal with it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just thinking about when I got into medical school, I was shocked, frankly. Like, I delayed applying to medical school for 2 years because I knew I was going to get rejected. And I'd rather it be possible that I'd get in rather than finding out that I wasn't getting in. And I finally, it was the day before applications were, final, and I overnight expressed my application. And when I got in, I was stunned. But then when I got there, I was imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh, when are they going to find out that they made a mistake? So I worked really, really hard in medical school. Although I was a really bad high school student and a mediocre college student, I was a great medical student. Like, I graduated AOA. I was second in my class. I really worked hard. And because of that, I had my pick of residencies. Like, I could go anywhere. And I remember going to interviewing at the Mayo Clinic, and I had a dream of being about a Mayo Clinic doctor when I was 8 years old. The night before, I remember I didn't sleep at all of my interview at Mayo Clinic. And what I was anxious, of course, but the prevailing thought in my head was, they're not going to want me. You're some, poor dumb kid from New Mexico, and I built myself up to, like, well, screw those guys. They if they don't want me, I don't want them. I had this whole scenario. But I go in, and it's a morning report where they talk about an interesting case, and they gave the presentation, the resident did, and it was a woman who was digging in her fish tank, cleaning the rocks and things, and she got this big sore on her finger. And it wasn't healing, and there was all, the tests and antibiotics and all these treatment. And then at the end, he's like, do you know what it was? And I knew. It was a mycobacterium. It's kind of a TB relative. I knew it, and I didn't have the confidence to say it. And the whole room was like, no, nobody knew. And I'm like, I know, but I wouldn't say it. And then when he said it, I'm like, why didn't I say that?
Yeah, it's important to remember this, and I talk a lot about imposter syndrome on another adventure that I'm on, and I think the best thing that I've ever been told about imposter syndrome is that the imposter is the thoughts. It's not actually you.
Yeah.
And what do we know about thoughts? We know that they come and they go, and we have 60,000 of them a day.
Yeah.
So why are you giving that? Yeah, but that's the minimum, right?
Yeah.
So but why are you giving that thought all this meaning?
Beautiful.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, but it takes practice to unwind that. And I think that's what I want people to do is to unwind
That's such a powerful story. I'm so glad you shared that. And it wasn't where we were headed in the beginning, but I'm like, how valuable to share with people. I want to switch back to the heart thing. So,
Sure.
you had this, false belief about your risk. Well, I won't say you had a false belief. You had a concern about your risk that actually was valid.
Yeah, I had a reason to be spooked.
Yeah.
Sure.
But you'd seen doctors before you saw me. What was different about our visit? Like, what was the information that you learned from that gave you the insight and to be actionable on?
Man, it probably sounds really corny, but I think it was you. I think it was just, I believed you. I trusted you. There was something about the way that you gave me the information where I believed you. And that's not everybody, and what's cool about this practice, if I can, is like, there's a lot of people that say that. You guys go read all the reviews about this place, and what you will see is they really care. I felt seen. I felt heard. For the first time in my life, I felt like somebody actually gave a crap about what I was saying. So I think it was that. But it was also the confidence in your expertise and what you had done and built for yourself over those years. And then this is probably the third thing, but maybe the most important, was that you believed in yourself so much that you did the same thing I did, which is you walked away from the big dog and you said, I'm going to do this on my own and I'm going to do it a better way. How can you not be inspired by somebody who's following their path? People want to come along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come along for the ride. And so then you take that and you take the fact that, like, not only were you talking about my heart health, but I was talking to somebody about sleep. I was talking to somebody about nutrition. I was talking to somebody about diet. I don't know. You hit it from all the places. And I just felt confident.
So that is medicine 3.0. We brought that up in the beginning. So this is Peter Attia. I give him credit for this. I love it. It's brilliant. But medicine 1.0 was when we were bleeding people and drilling holes in heads to release evil spirits.
Sure.
Medicine 2.0, science-based. That's been our heyday. Started with penicillin, really, but after that, we have followed the science and it's resulted in miracles. Like, we've added decades to people's lives. But the issue is we've become so good at treating sick people, we found out we're not good at keeping people well. And that's medicine 3.0, going beyond just, hey, I'll give you great treatment when you're sick, but where's those opportunities? And for you, based on your family history, I knew I needed to know what your arteries looked like to decide where we were going from here. Because I don't know if, based on genetics, did you get the bad genes or did you not get the bad genes? The only way, it was all guesswork unless I looked at your arteries. And so that's what we did. We did an ultrasound of your neck arteries, and you had a little bit of plaque there. It's not a problem. There's no disease there. There's no blockage. Blood's going everywhere that it needs to go. But what it told me is that you've led a very healthy life at your young of age to already have evidence of artery disease. You have that genetic predisposition to artery disease. The reason that's so valuable is that when we know somebody's risk, we're really good at stopping artery disease, where we can regress it, and so I see that, that medicine 3.0 approach to you proactive. We didn't just do an echo, put you on a treadmill, do some labs and say, hey, you're good. See you next year. We looked deeper, like where's some early detection that we can see that we can maybe head problems off in the future. And then from that, then we got back to the expert medical care was, okay, is there a reason for this? Like, is there this genetic predisposition? A lot of people don't have it, but some people do. Lipoprotein little a being the biggest, most common genetic cholesterol variant for early artery disease. Well, it turns out you had that, right? That was 20% of the world has that. Again, very powerful because it told us how to go about the treatment for you, and I knew we could stop your artery disease. in you, that ended up being getting your cholesterol great. That was the primary intervention that we had. But it was because you were doing such a good job at everything else. It's not the only reason that we can stop artery disease, but in you, that was the biggest opportunity. And that is, I believe, why we could so confidently say, I'm very optimistic about your future.
Yeah, me too. And I wish I'd only started 20 years sooner. Right?
Yeah, I still think you didn't miss any opportunity.
You sure?
Yeah,
Good.
I am. I really do believe that. Another thing that I've realized in this Medicine 3.0, journey, and this is the same for you, is that journey to better health, to optimal health, to longevity, is unique to each person. Each of us has different risks, benefits, and preferences, and how we go about that. And to add to that complexity of everybody's unique, it's constantly changing as well. Where your physiology is changing over time, the environment's changing, the opportunities are changing, the research data is changing, our insights are changing. Like, that's an ongoing process. And I've realized that it's one of the real opportunities in Medicine 3.0 is to bring the relationship back to that doctor-patient relationship. That used to be something that was cherished, right? Sacred. They talked a lot about the power of the doctor-patient relationship in healing. When's the last time you heard anybody talk about the doctor-patient relationship?
I didn't even let it in. I mean, for years, right? Yeah, and I think people, and this is no disrespect to you or any other doctor, but I just think that we think, well, I'll just go see a doctor and maybe they'll have some advice and then maybe I'll listen. Maybe I won't. But, and then I think for so many people, and I was definitely this person, is like you only deal with it when you need to.
Right.
I don't have that approach anymore. Right. Now I'm getting ahead of it. We just talked about action. Like, now I'm active. Now I'm pursuing what I know is going to be beneficial for me.
Right.
Why? Because I have a little wind in my sail right now. If you'd have told me, hey, you can try all this stuff, but there's still a pretty good chance you're going to die at 47 like your dad, what's the point?
Right.
Hey, we can do all this stuff, but you're probably still going to die at 73 like your mom. What's the point? I'm just going to enjoy my life. And I know a lot of people feel that way. I got to die from something. My mom said it.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that about myself. I see myself as a 95-year-old dude, still active, still walking, still moving, still doing all of the things.
That's the point, right? Like, as far as I know, nobody's getting out of here alive.
Right.
Right? Like,
it's not part of the deal.
I know there's talk about, in fact, I heard a physician talk 2 nights ago, and he talked about escape velocity, that the advances in longevity will outpace time. And if we can get to that escape velocity, people will live forever. I don't know. Like, I'm not buying into that yet. I'm not denying the possibility, because things that have happened in my 30 years of being a physician, I marvel at.
I can imagine.
But and especially more recently, the advances in insights and aging and longevity is incredible. Like, the things I can do today that I wasn't able to do even 2 years ago is mind-boggling. But the real point of this is not that you're going to live forever. It's going to give you that high quality years. Like, that's what we want. That's what we're after.
And there's a bigger piece to this, and you've got kids, I've got kids, and I always feel like our job as parents is to model behavior. We can talk to them until we're blue in the face. Will they listen? Probably not. But if they see us doing the thing, then they know that that's something that they can probably do themselves later on down the road.
Right.
And so this, to me, is like the biggest example that I hope I'm showing my kids, is that you can take control of your health. You can take control of your mind. You can take control of your life. You don't have to sit in the passenger seat and just wait for it to go by. You can drive. So get in the car, put your hands on the wheel, and let's go.
Is there a more powerful lesson than that?
No.
Yeah.
No, because I didn't have it modeled growing up.
Me either.
Nobody took care of themselves. Yeah. Everybody drank, everybody smoked, nobody moved, everybody gained weight, everybody died soon. I didn't have an example. And so I know for a lot of people, they sit in the same boat. They don't have an example. So how about this? You be the example.
Yeah.
I call it the transitional character. You be the one who decides that you're going to take your family's lineage and you're going to move it in a different direction. You know, the problem used to run in my family until it ran into me, that old saying.
Yeah.
Like, own that. Take control of your life. It's amazing how much your mind and your entire spirit frees up when you start choosing yourself.
Yeah.
And putting yourself first and really leaning into taking care of yourself.
Wow.
It's life-giving. It's life-changing. It's all the things.
And that's immortality, really, right? Like that, you having that impact on your children, they're going to have that impact on your grandchildren.
It's not a mistake, man.
No.
Listen, I mean, I know I've said this to you before privately, but I'll say it here. You feel like a godsend to me. You know, I'm going to get emotional right now. But when your dad dies that young and your mom dies that young, and then this brilliant cardiologist pops into your world, and not only do you get to work with him, but you get to be his patient, and you get to be under his wing, and he takes care of you. To me, it just feels like a godsend.
It's why I do what I do. And it's heartbreaking to me how many people out there that are suffering unnecessarily from things that are controllable. But it's often not that they wouldn't have taken control. It's that they didn't know they had the control. Because healthcare isn't really about health these days, right? It's about sick care, disease care.
That's what I was going to say.
So you go to your doctor, you get a 7-minute visit and a prescription, and probably if I would have sat down and said, hey, Mathew, here's your statin.
Yeah, right.
Take this. Okay, you didn't tell me why.
Truth is, I had a couple of cardiologists do that, and I didn't listen.
Yeah.
And I didn't stick with it.
And it was good advice, but they didn't have the relationship with you, the time. They didn't spend the time to and you know why they didn't spend the time? It's not because they're bad people. It's because they're told they got to see 25, 40 patients a day, and they just don't have time to do that. And I another example of this, I have a patient who has a heart condition that he has a high-grade blockage in a heart artery. But he has no symptoms. He's able to exercise vigorously, no problem at all. But everybody's telling him, you need to get that fixed. And I told him, like, look, let's sit down and talk about this. And I spent an hour with him. And he said, why have you, because he's understandably confused. He's like, I've talked to all these other doctors, and they say, oh, you need a stent. And you are the outlier in this. And I said, well, here's the truth. The research data already tells us that unequivocally there's no difference in outcome whether you get a stent or not in a situation like yours. It doesn't mean that all stents are bad. Some are good, but in your situation, we've studied this really well. There's no outcome difference, meaning no difference in death rates, no difference in heart attack rates. But every other doctor may know those same things, but their choices are, I can spend an hour with you and explain why there's options here, or I can, and I get paid $60 from the insurance company, and my administrators are yelling at me because I didn't see enough patients today, and my other patients are, yelling at me because I was late, or in 5 minutes I can say, oh, you need a stent, and that's going to pay me, several $1,000s, and my administrators are going to pat me on the back and say, hey, you had a lot of heart catheterizations last month, and you're going to get your RVUs, and you're going to get the doctors aren't evil. The incentives are wrong. The incentives are not aligned. And I think that's where you and we had the time to build the relationship to be able to say, here's why. Here's the options. And I didn't shove it down your throat. I didn't say, oh, Mathew, you're an idiot if you don't do this. Right. I said, here's the options. And you said, okay, that makes sense to me.
And the other piece of that is I was ready to.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and that's where I think that to really get results that people need to impact their health, to get the blood pressure, the cholesterol, the nutrition, the physical activity, the sleep, the stress, we needed relationships to do that. We need time. You can't build a relationship in a 7-minute office visit.
This is why you're doing what you're doing.
That's why we're doing what we're doing. So, what an incredible, powerful story you've shared, Mathew. There's a lot of us men that aren't really very smart about our health. I'll put myself in that category as well. I think it's part of our upbringing. It's showing a sign of weakness, maybe. I don't know what it is. I embarrassingly kind of bragged that I don't see doctors. I'm a doctor. I avoid doctors if I can. Yeah. What I mean by this, though, is I understand why a lot of men would say, well, why do I go see the doctor? They just do a bunch of tests, tell me I'm fine, or even maybe it's a fear thing, like, well, they're going to just tell me I have something terrible and I don't want to know.
Could be.
What would you say to those men?
What's coming through me right now, and it sounds really aggressive, but what's manly about dropping dead in front of your kids at 47 years old?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me what good that does to not be there for their weddings, for their kids.
Us men, women too, but we take care of those people.
Right. And I'm not, listen, I am not saying anything about my dad. He's a great man, but I don't believe he took great care of himself.
Yeah.
And he paid the price. And too many men don't take care of themselves, and we pay the price. And we don't have to. We don't have to.
And we don't have to.
Yeah. There's never been a better time to heal in the history of the world.
I can't end on anything better than that.
There's never been a better time. So act, move,
action. Thank you, Mathew.
Thank you.
All content created by me and HealthspanMD is for general informational purposes only and is not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information is at the user's own risk and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Hi, I'm Dr. Hurst. I'm excited you're here. I created HealthspanMD because the average lifespan is just 4,000 weeks. The point is, time is fleeting and every week counts. And while most people spend these weeks reacting to health issues, what most don't realize is that research tells us we have the power to add weeks, months, years, and even more than a decade of healthy life with a proactive approach to our health. At HealthspanMD, we are a longevity practice that offers concierge, primary, and cardiology care. We define longevity as achieving 3 objectives: a strong body, a healthy brain, and getting medicine 3.0, healthcare that helps you when you're sick, but then goes beyond to actively look for the best opportunities to avoid disease and stay healthy. The best time to prioritize your longevity? It is today. If you're not willing to leave healthy weeks, years, a decade or more on the table, share your information by filling out the form on this page so we can help you achieve your longevity.